In this segment, we consider how modern theoretical frameworks perceive public policies. In other words, these frameworks provide lenses by which we view the policies and the world we are interested in. That does not mean that there is a correct theoretical framework. Indeed, most policy scholars insist on the application of multiple frameworks to better understand how the policy world works. The classic models for understanding policy have a variety of problems, including not necessarily accurately representing reality, not being testable, and as a result, not being predictive. Many of the classic approaches to policy research have their relevance being doubted, as well as their reliability. However, more recent approaches to public policy represent advances. Not only are they more theory driven, there is a greater level of quantitative and qualitative testing of these theories as they are applied to a range of disciplines and to multiple different policy problems. Perhaps most important is public policy scholars are relying on a better understanding of the basis for human behavior. We start with narratives, the stories we tell ourselves and each other about who receives policies in terms of their worthiness and their power. Because our brains are limited in its capacity to keep the complexity of life in mind, with all the failings, foibles, and fabulousness of the many billions of humans on this planet, we group people to simplify our lives. But the same decision to simplify our lives makes life easier and more difficult for others based upon how the stories of the target populations are constructed. Likewise, because humans can be best seen as the storytelling animal, certain themes predominate because they are predictable and they help survival. Understanding the decisions made and how they influence others consuming the simplified reality they sell is perhaps the most important first step when understanding policy. With the social construction of target populations, we seek to understand how policies are provided based upon stereotypes we have about groups. These stereotypes are likewise self-reinforcing. The basic idea behind social construction of target populations is that how a policy recipient is defined influences the types of policies they will receive. For instance, the advantage, which includes small business, farmers, and military, and so on, receive benefits that they choose how to use themselves. The contenders, who are seen as negative forces but have power, include such entities as big businesses, CEOs of these corporations, weapons manufacturers, and those polluting the environment. They receive what on the face of it looks like punishment, but upon deeper inspection solidifies the hold of power they have through policies that subtly structure decisions. Those who are considered dependents are seen positively but have little power and can include single mothers, children, the poor, the homeless, and so on. They are given what looks to be handouts but are actually means of reinforcing their status as weak individuals. Finally, the deviants of the policy world include criminals, terrorists, illegal drug users. These individuals are seen as deserving of punishment, but they have little ability to fight back and to make things right. The narrative policy framework focuses on the politics of storytelling and the impacts this has on public policy. The told can range from societal to group to individual levels and affects what is seen as possible in the policy realm. While there are commonalities in the stories told, knowing how different groups construct their stories influences the possibilities that public policy offers. While knowing the stories told are an important first step to understanding the policy arena, perhaps more important is having a thorough understanding of the policy game that is played. Specifically, while the narratives would have you hating the player, the game is what might need to be hated more because it constrains or expands what may or may not be done, as well as who the major players are and how they cohere and compete with one another. The institutional analysis and development framework is based upon a coherent understanding of attributes, players, and the rules in the policy arena, and how this can influence the decisions made regarding collective action. The ACF is set up to deal with wicked problems. These involve substantial goal conflicts, important technical disputes, and multiple actors from several levels of government. The Advocacy Coalition framework considers these patterns of conflict and cooperation as a reflection of beliefs, with situations affecting learning and group interactions, and with that, major and minor policy change that might or might not occur. Because policy shapers, makers, and analysts are concerned with change, understanding patterns is highly important. This can be seen by considering the more micro level of specific policies and the players, as is the case with the multiple streams model, or considers the macro level changes and the effect of political institutions on enhancing or retarding the speed of policy change. The multiple streams, or the policy streams model, is based upon understanding how problems make it onto the agenda of policymakers. The multiple streams framework presents a process-based approach to understanding policy change based upon the merging of perceived problems, political realities, and policy options in a window of agenda and decision-making opportunity. It also represents the first major leap forward in policy theory by moving beyond simple causal theories. On the other hand, the punctuated equilibrium theory, by considering how public attention and institutional structure affects change, is able to describe both incremental and large-scale changes in policy. This is highly important because while some individuals are progressive in their desire for change, others are more conservative by preferring things to stay the same in a status quo situation. Finally, we consider how specific policies are implemented. This is especially important as policies do not spring completely new and freely formed from policymakers' heads, but are most often borrowed and altered in a manner that allows policy shapers and makers to bring about new ways of dealing with issues, both old and new. More specifically, the innovation and diffusion models of policy change consider those elements that influence patterns and speed of adopting new policies by considering both internal and external factors. While these models have been used for a long time and are derived from the work of communication scholar Everett M. Rogers in his studies of agricultural and healthcare innovation and diffusion at the individual level, they can be applied at the institutional level to effectively understand change. With all the frameworks available to policymakers, change, with the best interests of the public that is being served, may now be carried out much more effectively.